In this video, I'd like to talk about ether nomenclature. After watching the video, you should be able to provide a representative molecule of the ether, epoxide, sulfide, and thiol functional groups. You should be able to provide IUPAC accepted names for ethers and provide the structures of a few ether molecules: ethylene oxide, tetrahydrofuran, tetrahydropyran, and 1,4-dioxane. So let's simply start with some definitions of the functional groups. So the ethers contain a carbon-oxygen-carbon bond. The sulfides mimic that structure with sulfur, and that's a carbon-sulfur-carbon bond. Epoxides have a carbon-carbon-oxygen three-membered ring, and thiols mimic alcohols in that they have a carbon SH instead of a carbon OH functionality. So let's talk for a minute about ether nomenclature. The substitutive IUPAC nomenclature is preferred. In other words, the OR of the ether can be named as an alkoxy. So let's take a look at an example of that. If I were using the substitutive IUPAC nomenclature, I would name it as a methoxy substituent of cyclohexane. Methoxy cyclohexane, all one word. It's also possible to name the ethers as a functional class. So this would be a cyclohexyl methyl ether. Notice that there is a space between cyclohexyl and methyl, and another space between methyl and ether. This is the first functional group that we've seen that has spaces in the nomenclature. The methoxy cyclohexane is an unsymmetrical or mixed ether because the R groups bonded to the oxygen are different from each other. There are some ethers that I do want you to know the names and the structures of. The 4 cyclic ethers that I want you to be able to know and draw are ethylene oxide, that name comes from ethylene, which is this molecule, by common nomenclature. And so the ethylene oxide is the epoxide of ethylene. Another that you may already know is tetrahydrofuran. And you'll see this furan nomenclature coming up again when we hit carbohydrates. The sugars that are 5-membered rings with an oxygen in the ring are furanoses. We'll also see pyranoses, and that name is based on the structure of tetrahydropyran. So we'll see carbohydrates that are pyranoses, 6-membered rings with 1 oxygen in the ring. And one other ether that's commonly used as a solvent is 1,4-dioxane. So I'd like you to know the structures of these 4 ethers. You should also be able to name simple ethers, and you should be able to read your textbook regarding the physical properties of the ethers. So in this video, we've seen the structural definitions of ethers, sulfides, epoxides, and thiols. And we learned how to name ethers using either the substitutive IUPAC method, naming one of the R groups as an alkoxy, and we've seen the functional class name, where we name the 2 R groups with spaces in between, and ether as the last word of the name, the functional class of the molecule.